Bill, it's awesome to see you again. How are you doing?
All right. I'm great today. How are you, Mike?
I am great.
Great.
Bill and I met through Pavilion, a community that we're a part of. It originally started as a revenue collective, and it's a group of revenue leaders, actually revenue and operations and business leaders that come together inside a group, inside a Slack community, help people out with questions, help people get better at the kind of work that they do. And Bill is one of those people. So Bill, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. It's great to be here, Mike.
So let's talk a bit about something that's near and dear to both of our hearts, which is really how we met and turned into a deeper conversation, which is the forecasting challenge that exists inside businesses. Why do people struggle with forecasting?
Well, I think they struggle. That's first of all, great question. Thank you, Mike. People struggle with it because they, I think, have the wrong expectations and try to pursue hyper accurate forecasting when that really shouldn't be the goal. If you think about it, first of all, you're asking a sales team to forecast something they're in control of, right? So it's not like you're trying to forecast, where the rocket's going to end up or where Mercury's going to be, next week, that you have no control over. This is something you do have control over. So the idea of trying to forecast something and get right what you do control, and then rewarding for accuracy, is, kind of at cross purposes with what you're really trying to do, which is maximize sales. And so I think people try to pursue getting hyper accurate forecasts, and really, if you think about it, what would you rather do, Mike? Would you rather nail the forecast or crush your number?
Pretty simple one. I think most of us would like to crush the number. But so you talked about expectations. Like what are a couple of misses on the expectation side?
Well, one expectation is that it's possible to actually get close to some, number that you're predicting.
Yep.
And that's probably the biggest misconception, because you really have to have. Well, we're talking about sales, not revenue, recognized revenue, which is more manageable. But you were talking about new sales transactions, and you really would have to have an extraordinarily high volume of transactions of all the same size, and have hyper accurate ability to call which deals will close and which ones won't, like 90% plus. And if you had those conditions, you still might not be within 10%, most of the time. It's really hard. I think this is made worse because vendors are out there promoting, hyper accurate sales forecasts. So they're actually feeding the belief that you can do that. It's not possible. And as I said before, probably not desirable. The right thing to do is to focus on, instead of hyper accuracy, is to focus on what can I control to change the outcome, and what is the forecasting process that I go through do to inform those things about what I can control to change the outcome.
Let's talk about control. Like control from what perspective?
Well, what are the things that you can control, Mike? If you're a sales leader,
yeah,
what are the levers you have to improve the outcome? You tell me.
Yeah. So on my side, the things that I look at, the two most important numbers to me are pipeline created and pipeline developed. Those are the right. Two biggest numbers. And to clarify,
two separate things, right? Yeah. Okay. Got it. Yeah.
Yeah. So to clarify, pipeline created is the stuff that we start, like things that we put in at the top, and then pipeline developed are those deals that actually progress and how they progress. And progress is okay both on the winning and losing side of things. I want to see both. I want to see progression. I don't want things to be stuck. So if we're creating a lot of stuff that just gets stuck, we've got a problem. If we're moving a lot of things forward and they're all exiting, we've got a problem. If we're moving everything forward and we're winning on all of those, we potentially have a problem, or we potentially have an opportunity. So I look at those two key metrics. When I look at those two items and I have that visibility on those items, I can get a view on what's working, what's not working, and where are we stuck. And I'm happy to get into more nuance around that.
Yeah, no, these are the things that you should focus on. I mean, if you think about the top of the pipeline, separately from the deals that are in the pipeline, and you're right to focus on them as separate things, because there are similar related factors that you can control. But if you think about the top of the pipeline, what can you control? Mostly you can control the rate at which you're adding new opportunities to them.
Yep.
I mean, to some extent, you hope that the quality doesn't go down. I mean, but that's, you won't know until later on. So the rate at which you add deals, there are two other factors that you won't know until the end of much longer in a sales process, which are the size of the deals, the actual ultimate size of the deals. You're going to speculate on the size of the deals early on, but be warned, that's kind of fiction, because we really don't know what they're going to close at until we get very close to the end of the sales cycle, and the rate at which you're winning them. So there's three factors. So when we talk about sales optimization or using sales math to optimize what you're working on, those are the three factors you have. Can I add deals faster? Can I make them bigger? And can I improve the win rate on them? And win rate, of course, the complication to this is that, and this is one of the places where everybody simplifies it in order to make it something easier to do on the back of an envelope or in a spreadsheet, is to treat those as fixed figures. Win rate is a fixed figure, deal size is a fixed figure, and the rate at which you're adding them, we're just going to say we're going to add so many over time. The reality is that all of those occur as a function of time. So you're adding deals over time. Your win rate, if you say your win rate is 20%, you don't get to 20% immediately. It takes time for deals to mature and get to 20%. And there's a distribution around how long that takes. And the same thing happens, it turns out, with deal size. Deals that close in a shorter period of time are typically smaller than deals that you have more time to develop. So all of those are more complicated, nuanced functions of time. So if you're really modeling them properly, you want to incorporate those. Otherwise, you get erroneous, misleading results that can, cause you to be more optimistic or more pessimistic.
So we've hit on a couple of variables. One of the variables is number, and you could look at number and amount. I typically like to look at dollar size, broadly speaking. I know that there's some benefit in looking at number or frequency in there too, but you can look at a number there. The next piece that you had highlighted is time. You can have a date, some ideas on time and how long it might take for something to happen or when something is expected to happen. You've got an amount. We hit on that, the financial amount. So we've got the number, we've got the time. How do you think about stage and probability?
Okay, so once you're in the pipeline, it's kind of a different set of factors that come into play. And empirically, you can go back and measure stages and win rate as a function of time after entering a stage. It's really not that hard. It's something that I encourage everyone to do. We've got countless blogs on how to do this. And, I'd encourage people to go to our blog and read it, or you can use our free product. It does this for you. But if you think about win rate as a function of time and stage, you can build essentially empirical probabilities about how likely an existing deal is to close at some arbitrary point in the future, based on how similar deals in the past have behaved as a function of time over, how long they've been gestating. And you can use that to build a probabilistic forecast. And, that's just not that hard. People should do it. Win rate's a function of time and sales stage.
So let's talk about some of the mistakes that people make in this area of it. So, we'd hit on that pipeline created, like what's going to be pushed in. and now started to get into this pipeline develop. What happens once it's in and things move along? What are some of the mistakes that people make once it's in and ideally moving along when it comes to forecasting?
Yeah. So one common mistake is to measure win rates as a static figure and apply that static figure to some arbitrary forecast period in the future. Typically, this is done in the quarter, right? So I'm forecasting for the quarter, and I can go back and measure, like my last stage deals. I close 80% of them overall. So people will come up with that measurement, and they'll say, okay, well, I'm going to get 80% of the deals that are in my pipeline last stage this quarter. Well, maybe, but really, when you measured the win rate of 80%, what you actually measured was what we call the terminal win rate. This, if you wait long enough or wait forever. And if you apply that win rate to a 90-day forecast, or more likely it'll be a shorter term because you're doing it sometime in the middle of the quarter, say it's a 45-day forecast, you can get very optimistic results. So you're applying the long-term win rate to a 45-day forecast, and that's not really kosher.
And when you're looking at win rate, are you looking at frequency of deal, or are you looking at amount?
Just the deal. So the in our model, you separate them. You separate the amount from the win or the fact whether a deal is won or not.
Okay.
And then you put them back together at the end to put them together and build a forecast. Sometimes for some businesses, we find that there are meaningful segmentation or differences between big deals, win rates, and smaller deals. And you'll have a separate set of win rate curves essentially for each different size deal. And that can be done based on an amount cutoff, or it could be done based on what most people do is they say, well, we've got enterprise deals and we've got, SMB deals, and, those behave differently. And they do. We can see that. They measure that.
I think the key piece here, as you're talking through it, or that folks should be thinking about as they're going through it, is what are my numbers specifically? Like what's my experience? Like if you think of a restaurant or In-N-Out Burger, they are likely more concerned with number of people who walk in the building. As they're going to be able to do some math related to the number of people that walk in the building and the average size of that customer, the amount that customer is going to spend over a certain period of time. There are going to be other organizations who are going to be more focused on some other kind of metric. Don't take somebody else's metric and try to apply it to yours. Know your metrics. Is that fair?
Yeah. So I think like what you're getting at is with the burger place, most people who walk in the building are going to spend something with them.
Right.
Right. And so for them, it's feeding the top of the funnel analogy is people walking through the door.
Yep.
And, that can be the statisticians call it, that's a stochastic process, driven by, some Poisson distribution. Who cares what that actually looks like? But you can actually model that, and you can come up with, therefore, a prediction of revenue based on what the average spend is, and how frequently people arrive. That's really all there is to their business. It's not much of a pipeline, of trying to make sure you close a deal with a customer. Maybe there's a little bit of upsell. Well, wouldn't you like fries with or would you like to supersize that? So there's some upsell opportunity. For most B2B sellers, they've got two separate issues. They've got, feeding the pipeline, and they've got maximizing and optimizing the deals that are in the pipeline. And for deals that are in the pipeline, the key factors to look for there are your ability to advance them to the next stage in your sales process. And, this is one of the flaws in the way people forecast. They look at a list of deals and they say, give me the commit. And, the commits they're typically a tiny subset of the deals that you're working on. They have typically will close with a very high probability in about 3 days, and that's not a very useful predictor. But what you really want to do is not focus on whether the deal is going to be won or not, because if you do that, you're going to get a very short-term signal. What you want to focus on is, can I advance these deals to the next stage in my sales process? Because that's progress. It's presuming you have a well-defined and well-designed sales process. You know that if you move a deal from stage 1 to stage 2, that you can empirically measure what's the probability of closing that deal, and even what that looks like over time. So how do you measure progress in the existing pipeline? It's very different from measuring progress at the top of the pipeline. Top of the pipeline is how quickly do I add them. Inside the pipeline, it's, can I advance them to the next stage? And now you're talking about, the deal sizes, because they start to become meaningful at that point.
Where did this trap of commit and best start to come up?
Oh, it's part of the sales, methodology forever, as far as I can tell. I started with it. I think, I've got a few more gray hairs than you, but, I started with it long ago. And, it's just been the way people have done it forever. And, we've looked at this, and the results of what we looked at, they're pretty dismal. So what can you get out of we call that a classification forecast, because there's multiple classes. People will call it a roll up. Other people will call it the commit list forecast, or, and you typically get a commit, you get a best case, and you get, 2 numbers then, or add in the 1 and you get, 3 numbers, I guess. Or if you had an upside, you can get another number if you want. We've looked at this, and yeah, commits are really reliable with the short-term, notice. If you look earlier in the quarter, they don't tell you anything. And so if you're trying to get a sense of what's going to happen, it's not going to help you. The other thing that people say is they'll say, well, we use the commit list to prioritize resources. If you're on the commit list, you're going to get, anything you need in terms of, resources, legal resources or pre-sales resources, management time, management attention, which may be one reason that some people don't like to put things on the commit list, because they get more management attention than they want. But, it's a way to prioritize. And it's not bad for prioritization, but it's really short-term myopic. So, what you really want to do is have something that's more useful earlier on in the quarter, and something that gives you better guidance about how to allocate resources. And you don't get that from a commit or classification forecast.
I can't stand it. I think it's
it's a terrible. It's a really weak way to forecast, but it's what almost everybody does. And now I'll also say, I think that all the groupthink in sales tech is making this worse, because what all the sales tech vendors have done is they've added, let me streamline that roll-up process, that forecast submission and roll-up process for you. So you got a broken process, and I'm going to make it faster. So this is the do dumb things faster approach. I don't think it helps. It really doesn't help.
Yeah, it's where this, and this is an area that I've been kind of going a bit deeper into, is the importance of building skills before acquiring tools. And we've fallen into the trap of the shiny tool that has all of the different pieces of data in it, allows us to present and slice the data in whatever way makes sense for the objective that we have at the given point in time. And that objective at the given point in time might be get somebody off my back or set something else out, which ends up creating this huge challenge that we have around mismanaging expectations. And where I'm working on doing with folks is being really clear around what the job to be done is of the thing. Like, what's the job to be done of the forecast? What's the forecast do? So if I ask you, what's the job to be done of a forecast? What is it? What's the job to be done of a forecast?
I love the question. It's great. The job of the forecast is to tell you what to change in order to make the forecast and the outcome better. I mean,
Okay.
it's as simple as that. And I think this is where as I started out the discussion, people think the job of the forecast is to tell you what you're going to close, but your sales are not like the weather. You can control the outcome. So, what you really want to do is not nail the forecast. You want to, change it. I'm not saying a meaningful starting point is unhelpful. It's very helpful. But then the sales forecast, I mean, think about it this way. If the odds makers say your team is going to lose the game by field goal, does the team go out on the field and say, "Oh, well, we're going to lose by 2 points," it's just they do everything they can in their power to change the outcome, and sometimes they do. But the forecast should show you where you have leverage. Where's the most, what are the most important deals to work on? And you can't. The premise of the commit list approach or the classification forecast is that you're going to make a specific call on individual deals that are going to come in. You can't do that. No one can call individual deals. What you can do is you can call a portfolio of deals, and so if you've got one deal that you're working on in the quarter, the forecast is not going to be particularly helpful or useful. If you've got, 100 deals you're working on in a quarter and you're expecting to close 30 of them, hey, now you got some meaningful statistics and you can start to use that to inform what to work on and what would happen if you change these particular underlying factors.
You've hit on one of the things that typically will come up, or an important thing that will typically come up, which is the whole idea of forecasting on single deals.
Yeah. Well, all right. So, all right, let's play that out. Suppose you have 10 deals in your pipeline.
Yes.
Right. And you're just trying to figure out which of those 10 deals are going to come in. Now, some of them have higher probability than others. Okay. But, you're going to say, I'm going to close, some number of those deals. Well, if you actually do the math, if there's 10 deals, there are 2 to the 10th possible combinations of deals that could be won.
Okay.
So that's 1,024, roughly 1,000. All right. Now that's a small pipeline with 10 deals. If you've got 50 deals in your pipeline, you have 2 to the 50th power. That's more possible combinations than there are atoms in the universe. And you cannot possibly attempt to call the exact combination that you're going to close. It's just not realistic. And so people will say, well, if one falls out, that's, 100,000, I can find another one that's 100,000 to fill it. Yeah. It might not be 100, it might be 150, or it might be 75, but, yeah, you can. But what you're describing is you're trying to say that I'm going to make up for my inability to be exact by letting others come in that weren't forecasted. And really what you're doing is you're understanding that there's a distribution of possible outcomes. And, what you really should do is understand what the distribution is and then use that information to inform what you can do to change the outcome.
Imagine the scenario where at the beginning of the year, or the beginning of the quarter, you start planning on the deals that you're going to pull forward by giving them a discount in the last 3 days of the quarter to bring those forward. And then what impact that has on your future forecast or your success rate relative to the forecast that you made at the beginning of the quarter. Yet we still play these games. Why do we continue to play this game the wrong way?
You mean by giving discounts at the end of the quarter to get deals to happen?
Either of those, like not, and really, so I think there's that piece, but more about, hey, at the beginning of the quarter, we put together our best and our commit. And maybe some other number that we want to add in there. And we do it based on success that we have had in the previous year. And we do it based on this kind of finger in the air piece. And we do it based on kind of gut feeling on how we go. But we know that the behavior that's going to happen as we move through the quarter is going to be the same that has happened in other quarters. We're going to figure out a way to pull some things forward. We know that some things are going to push out.
Yeah.
We know that some people are going to choose not to put things on their commit list because they don't want to be overly managed on that side of things. We've conditioned that behavior, especially when you put something on your commit list and it doesn't come in. And now all of a sudden, what'd you do wrong? Or why'd you put it in there? Or whatever.
Bad vibes for that. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Bad vibes for putting it on the commit and not having it come in. Yeah. That's what drives the 3-day notice.
So we play this game over and over again, but I don't know that maybe the real question that I'm asking or thinking about in my head as we're having a conversation around it is, how can we get better at setting expectations with our team around what the job to be done is of the forecast, or what the purpose is of the forecast, and how the data is going to be used above and beyond data to beat you over your head with?
Yeah. So it's really simple to me. Use the forecast to inform what you got to do. I mean, if the forecast is encompassing enough, it says, here's a lever, you can add more deals and you can understand the effect of them. And if your sales cycle is short enough, maybe you can have an effect this quarter if you can find a way to get more deals. And if your sales forecast is smart enough, you could quantify that for you. What's the effect of, today adding or starting today to double the rate at which we add deals over the course of the quarter? And so that's, understanding the effect of making changes, little things you can tweak on the, inside the sales engine that will change the outcome. So, that's what people should be doing. As to your earlier question, why do we do these things like discount at the end of the quarter to pull things in? We do that because, one, we did it last quarter and we created a deficit, a smaller pipeline this quarter. Two, we have to do everything we can to maximize sales. And you can always argue whether or not, or ask the question whether or not the discount was necessary and whether it was the right thing to do. A lot of people don't really care whether it happens so much this quarter or next quarter, as long as they get the deal and just de-risk the deal as much as they can. So we do that. That's why we do it. We're trying to maximize sales.
When you think about forecasting, what's the, how does the perception of forecast, depending on if you're talking to, and I'm going to put out a couple of different roles out there, the CFO, the CEO, the CRO, and maybe the COO. How does the view or perspective of the forecast change in each of those roles?
So, some of those roles try to use the forecast as an incentive, essentially, or a way to manage the organization to do better. You've got, your forecast is too low. I need a better forecast. And, it depends upon, this may vary from company to company. It may not always be the same role, but you've seen, instances where people will say, hey, your commit's not high enough, or, we don't have enough pipeline. You need 3x pipeline. So, let's get the pipeline up. I think these are really weak ways to use sales forecasts. A sales forecast is never going to be right. I've already said that about a dozen times. And all it really can do is tell you where are the points that you have some leverage. It can also help inform the likelihood of getting to various outcomes. And the board, if you look at a board will say, well, what's the commit? And I find that really limiting because, as I said before, the commit doesn't exactly come in. some that comes in a short term, but even some of those fall out, and then typically will say, well, one fell out, but we'll find another one to replace that one. And I think that's an unconstructive way to use a forecast. What the forecast, a more constructive way to use a forecast for the C-suite and the board would be to say, here's a distribution of possible outcomes given the way things are going today, the way things have gone in the past. If we keep doing business as we have, this is the distribution. And it's typically a normally distributed, curve around, some central point, which hopefully is close to your goal. But it doesn't mean you're going to hit the goal, right? If if anybody who knows what a normal distribution is, the midpoint, the mean is not, you're not going to be guaranteed to hit it. Half the time you'll be above and half the time you'll be below. It's not quite the mean, it's a median, but they're often very similar. So, the idea here should be to communicate instead of an average forecast, communicate what's the distribution look like and what are the odds of getting to our goals. So we've got a distribution centered around 1 million, and we have about a 3% chance of getting to 1.4 million. I want to get to 1.4 million. How do I change things now to get there? And here's the list of deals we're working on. If we can advance our cause, meaning move them all to the next stage in the sales process, the forecast moves from an expected or midpoint of 1 million up to 1.5 million. Now I've got a better than 50% chance of getting to my number. But it's not about a commit list. It's about, a work list. It's about, here are the things we're focused on. And if we can make these changes, which we think are, possible in many of these cases, if we can make these changes, then we'll be improving the outcome. And so I think that the whole communication among the executive leadership team needs to shift from what is the forecast to what is the distribution, and share the distribution. I mean, our application, of course, produces that. It's not hard to do it when we have countless blogs on how other people can do that themselves. If you start changing the conversation with your leadership team about, what are the odds of getting to our goal based on this distribution, and what are the things we can change? Now you have a much more constructive discussion about, whether you have the resources, the market, the know-how to actually make those changes.
You get yourself into a position where you can actually start to make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Like decisions around what we should be doing, what we can be doing, what we're going to eliminate, and also get more comfortable with what risks are we willing to take. When you gain this perspective and you start to look at it and say, okay, here's a view of the future where things could be someplace between here and there. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're trying to show, here's an alternate view of the future if we can make these changes. Yeah.
And then, how do you help people get more comfortable with the idea that, like you've said multiple times, your forecast is never going to be right, or rarely is your forecast ever going to be right? It's hard to figure out, especially as time starts to expand. So how do you get people comfortable with the idea that the forecast is purely an estimate based on interpretation of specific data points that you have at any given point in time?
Yeah. So I think, one of the things, first of all, people pretty much know this. Nobody can predict the future. And it's baffling to me that people think that this is possible. And I think it's probably exacerbated by, at one point, 3 quarters ago, we exactly nailed the forecast within like 2%, Yeah, that can happen. But, that doesn't mean it's a repeatable process. So I think people understand if you really walk them through their thought process on this. They know that it's only possible to be exact if you produce a very conservative forecast.
Mhm.
And that's not desirable. I mean, I can, I can give you a forecast that I know I will meet, 0. Now, that's not particularly useful, but it is one that, I can nail. On the other hand, again, if a forecast is right, then I didn't do anything to change anything that was going to happen. I just, did exactly what I said I was going to do. Don't you want to constantly improve? Don't you want to maximize? I mean, what happens if I forecast, exactly, to use a round number, I say I'm going to get to 10 million and I get to, 10 million. Do I now stop selling? I mean, if you put too much focus on this accuracy thing, you will drive the wrong behavior. I mean, do salespeople stop selling when they hit their number, when they hit their forecast for the, you shouldn't stop selling. But if you, I mean, I actually ran a poll on LinkedIn recently, and about half the people said, well, yeah, forecast accuracy should be a component of sales compensation. And I don't think that's a good thing to do.
No. Could you imagine?
No.
Wow.
Yeah. But, I don't know if people were reacting because they were just viscerally reacting. God damn it. It's so frustrating that we miss our forecast, so frequently, or if that really was, real practice. I hope it's not real practice, because it's not a good idea.
I think, unfortunately, when you get RevOps people involved in it, and people on the financial side of the business get involved, there can be that, like you said, visceral response to, hey, this is what we need, and we need to have an accurate forecast because of X, Y, and Z, whatever the X, Y, and Z is. Typically, the forecast is what helps you plan and decide where can you take on additional risk.
Right.
And this is why that relationship between the CFO and the CRO, or the CFO and the sales leader, or the financial team and the sales team or success team, whoever's responsible for generating growth and revenue in the business, it's very important that they have a relationship with each other that's built based on the expectations and trust and transparency and communication, not sharing a story because they think that that's what somebody on the other side needs to hear. A forecast coming in at 12 million on a $10 million forecast is better than coming in at 8, but it still creates significant risk for the business. It creates unnecessary load on the business where you may not be able to fulfill the customer need. And then ultimately you may not get to that revenue number because you have cancellations at a certain point in time. So this forecast discussion is one that I'd like to see more leadership teams align on, both definition, understanding, job to be done, purpose, and use, and view of how it can change over a period of time. In the same way that the weather will change. It's kind of easy to predict weather out here in Phoenix. It's going to be hot. Like this time of year, it's just going to be hot. And there's not going to be a lot of water. It's not going to rain a lot. Last week on June 1st, we had the first rain in 100 and some odd years in the Phoenix area on the 1st of June. Could someone have predicted that 30 days in advance? Highly unlikely. Could someone have predicted it on May 31st? Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. This is the problem. Yeah. You can, I mean, and this is what commit lists do, right? They're very certain with, actually, when we did the study, we had to remove the same day commits because a lot of them were, I committed it at 8 a.m. and it closed at 5. Does that count as a successful prediction? So we eliminated them, and if you eliminate those, we got like 80 to 90% success rate on commits within a quarter, but with an average lead time of about 3 days. So yeah, not particularly helpful. Let me share what I think this should look like. Can you let me share my screen here?
Sure.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I can't maximize. How do I maximize? Well, you're gonna have to, let's see. There we go. All right. So, here's what I mean by a distribution. Before I was talking about distribution. Imagine, so here's a forecast. This is the expected outcome here. And that's the average expected outcome. It's never going to happen, right? But it's going to be the, around the most likely thing to happen.
Hey,
Imagine.
Bill, you're currently sharing Funnelcast with a couple of links. I'm not seeing any
Oh,
visuals.
okay. Let's see. Let me try that again. Back to meeting and stop sharing. Oh, I see what happened. Okay, let's try this again.
So I'm going to remove all of that.
Yeah, I got it. All right. Okay. Can you see this?
Yep.
It says it has a 428. Okay. So imagine you're trying to communicate what's going to happen. This is a typical forecast this is a 1 year period. So here's a 1 year forecast. In this business, we have a range of possible outcomes. You can see that over here. Obviously, the higher up on this curve you are, the more likely it is. So this line in the middle is the average of all the forecasts right there. And you can see there's, estimated 49% chance of being to the right or north of it, that figure. So the way, my suggestion is the way to communicate forecast is not to say, look, our forecast is, in this case, 6 million is the average. That's not particularly helpful. You need context. What does context mean? Well, 49% chance of being over that figure. Now you've got context. Now I can, say, well, that means half the time, essentially, I'll be over it. But, if you want to commit, here's the left side of this shaded area in this chart here happens to be an 80% prediction interval. So there you go. Meaning 90% of the time, 10% of the time you'll be under that, 90% of the time you'll be over that figure. So if you wanted to commit, you just, look, this is the low end of the range. 9 out of 10 times will beat that $5.3 million figure in this example here. And instead of trying to nail the forecast, now you have an expected, distribution of outcomes. And you can actually look at, well, what are the effects of making changes to the inputs to this whole process? What are the inputs of the things you described before? So, if I increase the amount of the arrival rate of new deals coming into the pipeline here, you can see, there you go. I've got a different distribution if I can, get a 58% increase in this case in new business opportunities that I'm generating. So you can now have an intelligent conversation. Well, if I want to get to that goal there, I've got a much more reasonable chance of getting to that higher figure, given if I can increase the generation rate. This is what I mean when I say you can use the forecast. This is what I mean when I say you can use the forecast to inform what to work on and when.
So thanks for showing the Funnelcast stuff. When you think about the data that people have access to today, what are they typically missing? Not how they use it, but what are they typically missing?
So actually, I would go the other way, Mike. I think that they have what they need to forecast. What they try to do is to incorporate too many other things into the forecast, and it becomes too complicated too quickly. Not saying those other things aren't necessary or helpful, but what are the basics? Basics are, what stages are deals in? What are their amounts? What are their close dates? And you have those automatically recorded in every CRM system, right? You can layer on top of that many other factors. You can say, well, I treat new logos differently from expansion opportunities with existing relationships. Okay, fine. That's a segmentation variable. But then people get more complicated. They'll say, well, wait a minute, let's look at activity, or let's read emails and get sentiment from the emails or from meeting recordings. You can do that. If you haven't got the basics of those three things that I mentioned earlier working first, then adding all that other stuff is a premature optimization of what you're trying to do. You really need to just get the basics first.
And what of the basics? What do they typically screw up?
Well, they have them. They just try to add too much other things to it. I mean, it's always possible, of course, that they've made changes to their sales process. So what was qualified this year is something different from what it was last year, and you have to deal with all those things when you're modeling and building a forecast. But I think the bigger mistake is not missing data. In my experience, it's trying to add too much data, because there's a principle in data analytics or data modeling of, it's called the principle of parsimony. It's Occam's razor, if you're familiar. The simplest model that explains the expected outcome is the preferred model. And, I would say the simplest model that explains the outcome and then shows you what things you have to change is even more preferable.
Yeah. So the most common mistake I see out there, and it continues to repeat itself, and maybe it's me, maybe I'm the common denominator, but the typical mistake that I see repeat itself is lack of clarity around stage definition.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The lack of clarity around stage definition, whether you're changing your process at any given period of time or whatever the thing is, the lack of clarity around stage definition creates more risk in forecasting than many of the other things that we've talked about. There's another piece that creates risk, which is the idea that deals can't move forward and backward. That every deal has to move forward. It never goes backward. And there are some leaders who really struggle with that. So if I was to put in a second issue, it's the perception that deals cannot go backwards, that deals don't go backward. And I would challenge any leader that's listening to this to think of a time where you were getting ready to purchase something and then decided at some point in time, right now it's not the priority, or something else we need to consider something else, or we need to get other people involved. If that's happened to you, expect that it will happen on the customer side. So on this stage definition piece and Bill has highlighted, it's the stage, it's the amount, and the close date. If you ask your team to define each of the stages in your process, and you have 10 members in your team, and you hear anywhere between 5 and 10 different answers on each of those stages,
problem, yeah.
Go take care of that.
Yeah.
Go take care of that.
That's a great point, Mike. Actually, I should preface what I said is that the premise of building a model is that you have a reasonably well-defined structured sales process.
Yep.
And the first thing you should do is focus on making sure that you have a well-defined sales process. What does that mean? Clear definitions of what the criteria are to move from one stage to the next.
Yep.
And, that can be an entry or an exit criteria, however you define them, but very clear definitions. And those kind of tell the sales team what they need to be working on at each stage of the sales process. And if you have that, then you can get a higher fidelity forecast. If you have poor definitions, then what you're going to see is, multiple people will score or classify a deal in the same deal in different stages. And that means you'll have a lower fidelity forecast. Now, by the way, if a reasonable analytic model will learn that average behavior and score something in the middle. And so sometimes it'll be, optimistic, sometimes it'll be pessimistic, depending upon who's classifying the deal and which stage it's in. But it will on average be right, but it'll be a much higher variance. And so if you wanted to, narrow the variance of that distribution that I showed you, work on the sales process, work on clearer definitions to it, because you'll get much better fidelity in the forecast.
And when you use tools like a Funnelcast, and we'll include some links in the show notes on how people can get in touch with you, Bill. But when you use these tools, those tools can help reveal blind spots and create perspective, and help you identify some of the questions that you can be answering around hey, why does a team typically perform different than another team, even when working inside the same industries? Or why do certain industries differently? Once you get the data, you can do something with it to gain some insight and perspective, and then ultimately get to a point where you can start to make some decisions or choices. Bill, where can people find out more about what you're working on?
Oh, we'll go to our website. It's funnelcast.com, like a sales funnel with forecast mushing together. So funnelcast.com, and the blog is filled with lots of information about how to do this all yourself. We're very open about how to do this. We share the model, we share the details of how to construct it. If you want to get started immediately, you can use our free product, and that's on the website as well. So go to funnelcast.com and you can take a look and learn how to do it, or do it with our product.
Perfect. Bill, thanks for the conversation. We'll include links in the show notes. If anybody knows somebody who would enjoy this discussion or gain value from this discussion, please share it with them. Let Bill and I know. Those shares help. Ask questions via LinkedIn. We're happy to respond to those. Sales is a thinking process. Business is a thinking process. Life is a thinking process. How are you thinking different about yours?